So after a 24-hour delay due to tropical storm, we are back here on Random Review, covering another recent Transformer release from Japan, and one of those oddball Legends releases that just came kind of out of nowhere, but that doesn't mean it's an unwelcome thing. This is Takara's version of Skids from the Generations line over here in the US. This toy is rather infamous, but we will get to that in due time. First off, I always forget to mount the weapons in vehicle mode to show that they can be mounted. So hey, I smartened up and just started off that way. They peg into the side and seem to be designed to go this way, but they can go the other way too. So there we go. That's out of the way. Let's take a look at this vehicle mode. Now, the instructions in the box describe this as a compact car, whereas I would traditionally categorize Skids as an SUV, though he definitely does not have that same bulky silhouette here, which is kind of a thing I think Hasbro intended because, well, have you ever noticed that SUV Transformers always seem to be the shelf warmers, especially when they end up named Skids? I'm sorry, Alternators line. You died way before your time because of this guy. So still, this is obviously a compact vehicle, though it still shares some of the same silhouette of the original character. Very brilliant blue plastic all over this guy. Looks quite nice. He has the traditional striping down the side, the white and red signature of the character. Red for the tail lights, as well as red for the rims of the wheels. And then we get to the front, where we have a ton of paint, with the yellow for the headlights, a little bit there, a little bit of the red tracing around a black painted front bumper. The brush guard and the grille, all done up in silver. And then, of course, you have the pink lines of Energon. Now, this is something, this is very Alex Milne in design. I've seen in the comic books where sometimes it's pink, sometimes it's red. Kind of depends on the colorist for that particular book. But you can see pink lines going all throughout this guy, giving him a little bit of a unique bit of detailing that, you know, you really don't get out of Skids because, it typically doesn't have pink on him. But hey, it's an IDW thing, which is weird for Japan to actually have something something accurate to IDW. But I will take what I can get. Alright, so there's nothing really to this guy beyond that. You saw the vehicles peg in, or the guns peg into the sides. The wheels roll well enough. 2 are pinned in and 2 are mushroom pegged, so it kind of balances out to half decent rolling. Let's go ahead and get this guy into the robot mode, and we can get to the real meat of the figure, as well as the real issues here. Now, one thing about the transformation on this guy, he does very much come from the school. Man, there's so much hair. You can tell the dog has been hiding in the room because of the storms, because there's hair everywhere. But yeah, you can tell this guy comes from in that Universe 2 generation style of toy engineering, because a lot of him does feel very similar. You do have a lot of elements, especially in the legs and the front end, that do fall very much in the Universe Hound and Reveal the Shield. Hang on. Anyway, the Reveal the Shield Jazz mold. So in that sense, you do have a lot of familiarity here, though the engineering is changed up a little bit in order to allow some different things to go on. It does create a very familiar, but at least somewhat changed experience. There's a few parts on this that do get a little bit weird. I find him a little bit finicky to get back into vehicle mode, you know, more so than the robot. You got ball joints that have to slide out here, which are pretty stiff and kind of hard to get to cooperate sometimes. But once you do, you can fold down the front section like so. This is where we get to one of the parts that's always kind of messed up for me, because this hinge that holds the head in place, you see how it kind of opened up the side there? Yeah, sometimes that will just completely fall apart and the head will just fly off because it doesn't fit to my liking. But it doesn't always happen, as we can see happen there. Let's get those folded down so we can go ahead and show you the initial robot mode, the way it was meant to be seen. Straighten everything up before we lock everything down into place. Make sure the backpack is hooked onto this big silver bar, by the way. Make sure it's all, there we go. flush to there, and everything's in where it's supposed to be. Now if we mount up everything the way it's supposed to be, yeah, I believe there's no real lock-in point for that. It just kind of settles in. But once we get that done, we have our skids. Our generation skids in robot mode, which actually manages to have a fairly sleek profile. One thing about the way the shoulders transform out, that sliding motion, they don't go out too far. And what would typically give you a very wide stance, now it's giving you this high shoulder thing, which does give him something of a unique silhouette amongst the Generations toys. So that's actually not a bad thing. It does give him some uniqueness. If we take a look at the head, it does have a very nicely sculpted, very IDW Skids head going on. I'll just adjust it for the lights. Yellow painted up for the eyes as well as in the crest there. A little bit of silver painting up the face as well as some along the sides. And yeah, you can definitely see a lot of attention to detail going on around here. This is always a good thing. Once we have him in robot mode, I'm going to get this out of the way right now. One of the biggest things you're going to notice and one of the biggest things you're going to loathe about this toy, balance. He has these gigantic feet, but they have no heel. And because he has a backpack of kibble, he does get very back heavy. So unfortunately, getting him to pose is not the best. And typically, I would bend the ankle forward and just kind of rock his legs backward a little bit to counterbalance. But we have this little nub of plastic sticking up there that's going to make that a little bit difficult. So what you actually have to do is push the transformation joint here one step further out. It does lock into position, so this might be an intentional design element, but it does lead to some kind of wonky looking legs with this big bend in the middle. Still, I will prefer that to looking at my skids on the ground, because this way he balances quite nicely and doesn't really have the same issues he had before. So hey, look, I can actually take my hands off the toy and he stays where he's supposed to stay. That's always a good thing. We're also going to talk about the major thing, what a lot of people probably clicked on this video to find out if you have not read up on Legends Skids so far, and that is joint tolerance. See, the original Generations version of this figure, terrible QC. A lot of examples of that toy had extremely loose joints all over, and so many people said Crosscut fixed it. I say otherwise because my Crosscut sucked. So that was unfortunate, and from what I know, I heard similar reports about the third use from the movie line. So this is not a mold that has had good luck when it comes to joints and articulation. This version, pretty solid. The joints are nice and firm on this version of the toy. Takara tightened up everything. Everything just kind of has a nice little firm feel to it. Everything stays in its positions and it feels nice. Like better than any version of this toy I've personally handled. That's finally solving the biggest issue to the figure. Let's go ahead and talk articulation now that we know that it is nice and secure. The ball joint in the head works pretty well and has a pretty decent range of motion. The arms, while the transformation has kind of a uniqueness to it, it does unfortunately mean that there's not as much range to these as I would like. I'm trying to show you, like, that's about as far out as the ball joint can get. It feels like if I pull it out any farther, it's not gonna go. Yeah. So that's kind of an unfortunate thing. So he does have some limited outward motion. So his arms are kind of limited. So that's unfortunate. He still has full up and down and a little bit to the side, just not a whole lot. You do have elbows that are ball jointed, so that's a thing. Rotation, bending, 90 degrees, all works. And, you know, I wish these worked for actual articulation, but it's pretty much just something from the transformation. We do have a decent waist joint, which is good. The hips are great. Full range on the ball joints. Nothing really restricting unless you want to go backward for some weird reason. That doesn't work as well as I hoped. Thigh swivel works. You also have a knee joint with some nice detents in it. You also have like I said, that midpoint in the leg if you want to use it, as well as a ball jointed ankle for all your tilting and arcing and whatever needs. That is a pretty decent level of articulation. And now that he can actually hold a position, it's an articulated figure that actually works the way he's supposed to. So that is a beautiful, beautiful thing. Now, along with all these improvements, he does still come with your typical stuff. Let's get those weapons back in here, and we'll show you what else they do. So, of course, he does have these two little weapons, which are fine. This little looks like a tiny little machine gun, like a tiny little Tommy gun with that little barrel. And then his signature weapon from the IDW comic. But we can also interlock them for a full-size version. That is my preferred method. So that is quite a cool weapon, and he looks good holding it. But let's say you want a few more weapons on your Skids. Like this is just this isn't cutting it for you. You're used to seeing Skids loaded for bear. So let's make that happen. I'm going to unclip the back section. Those guns are going to spring up and fold over the shoulders, like so. I'm going to take these sections, these parts that have been painted yellow, bring all of, and you'll see beside it, the black sections can fold all the way down to reveal some missile batteries. And why not, we're also going to open up these pieces on the underside to reveal more guns. And you know what? Here, let's separate these weapons so he can also have a gun in both hands. Because at this point, screw it. He's got guns, guns, guns. This is absolutely ludicrous. And this is by far the best part about this toy. This is why I'm so happy to finally have a good version of this figure. Because having a deluxe with so many like hidden accessories, it's been so long since we had something that, and it's a really cool thing. Like I have to go back to like Cybertron Defense Hotshot to get just like that much raw firepower out of a deluxe. It's a really neat trick to hide so many weapons in a single figure, and it's a type of gimmick that really doesn't interfere. As we've seen, he transforms fine, and his proportions are really good. You know, if it wasn't for those shoulder guns flipping up on their own, you know, some of this you might not even notice, especially the shoulder missiles. So that's quite a cool thing, and I quite enjoy it. So beyond that, if I'm going to point out any negatives besides the balancing issues, you know, he does have some kibble, some weird parts that are hanging off the back, but that's pretty much it. All around, this Skids manages to be a pretty solid figure. I don't think he's quite as amazing as some people were trumpeting once he first came out, but now that he's actually had some majorly needed mold improvements, I finally have a version that I can recommend to you. If you've been waiting for a decent version, if you were hoping that, you know, if you're kind of weighing between, well, is Takara's version going to be like the fourth version of this mold, so it's going to be degraded even farther, or is it actually going to go through the trouble of changing and fixing everything the mold needed fixed? It seems to have fixed pretty much everything the mold needed. Outside of the shoulder being a little bit hindered, well, quite a bit hindered, let's be honest here, he's a really solid figure, and I'm finally happy to have a decent Skids amongst my collection and myriad of Transformers. It's just too bad it has to be the import version, which is technically going to be the most expensive version to get. But if you're a Skids fan, hey, you finally have one you can enjoy. That's good, right?